This is a gaming PC that I themed out using some Waterslide decals and my Silhouette Cameo and Silhouette Design Studio. I'll show you how I did this in the video, so let's get started. So to get started, what we have to do is get set up in Silhouette Studio. I'm using Designer Edition, but this will also work in Basic Edition as well. And so you can see right in the center of the screen, we have the virtual cutting mat, and we'll be using a cutting mat for this particular project. And it's kind of default with the grid on, and then the media being a 12 by 12, which is the size of the cutting mat that's automatically selected. And so in setup, you should probably have your page setup menu activated. If you don't, it's the tab that looks like a little folded piece of paper at the corner there. It should bring up this page setup menu. Okay. And then by default, it has you in this design area setup. And then under items 1, 2, and 3, you'll set your machine, your cutting mat, and your media size. For the machine, I'm using a Cameo 3, but if you open the drop-down menu, you can select whichever system you are using. For your cutting mat, and again, we'll be using a cutting mat for this one. Right now, it's Auto Cameo, and that's also the same as a 12 by 12. So select the size of cutting mat as appropriate. If you're using like the 12 by 24, be sure to select that. I'm just using the 12 by 12. Your media size, and for this one, the Waterslide decals that I purchased from Amazon, and I'll have links in the description, is actually sized in the A4. So under the drop down menu, you can pick whatever size that you purchased, and there's also an option to do a custom size, and then you will put the dimensions in there for height and width of that media. But for this case, we're using A4, and what you'll see happen here is you notice now my virtual cutting mat, the white area, which is the media size, has been adjusted accordingly to the size of A4. Now, what I also like to do is I like to take off the grid lines, because for this you don't need it. You can right click within the white space here anywhere or just on the screen, and then you can click hide the grid, and it makes it nice and clean. And this red line here that you see that's left over is your cut border. And since we will be doing a print and cut, I like to turn on the print border as well, which is this kind of light gray line here. And I think, if I understand it correctly, this is what gives you an idea of how big you can print things within the media that will still be cuttable as well, as long as it's within these borders here. That's how I understand it. Now, like I said, we are going to be doing a print and cut, so we have to have some registration marks put into here. And so what you do is under page setup again, look under this tab here that has the piece of paper with like 3 marks on the top right, the top corners except for the bottom right corner, and then click registration marks on. And by default, you'll see that it turns on this black square, and then up here in the top right and bottom left, these L-shaped thick black marks. Yours may be slightly different. What I did was I adjusted the length of mine to make them bigger, so it's more for the Cameo to be able to scan. And also I adjusted the thickness as thick as possible. Again, that's just a personal preference. I'm sure that if you put it super thin, it can scan as whatever it needs to register where it is going to be relative to where your graphics will be. And then on the inset, you can see that if I adjust this, it makes the area a little bit smaller or bigger. And again, I like to maximize that, or minimize it in this case, all the way to the left, so that there's the most area in here for putting your graphics. And so that's basically getting set up to go. And the next thing we need to do is insert or bring in your images. So now that we have everything set up, what we'll have to do next is bring in your images to be able to print them. And I recommend for this particular drill, downloading images that are PNG types, whatever the image name is, .png. You can certainly get GIFs or JPEG style images, but the PNGs basically have no background. And what I mean by that is, if you look at these two images here, you notice that there's no white square around them. And I put it off to the side on purpose because it has a gray background. If I put it on here, on the white area, you wouldn't necessarily see that. For example, this one has a white background, but if you kept it on the white area, you would not necessarily know that it had a white background just by looking at it. You might know by clicking on it and looking at the square around it that forms up, or moving it off the side. But what ends up being is, if you were to print this image here, put it in your cutting media and print it, when you go to cut it, if you go to the send item and click this area and then select cut, you'll see the red line forms around the square. And so that is what your Cameo will actually cut. And for this project, what we want is to cut right around the actual image itself. Unless you want to have a big square around it, that's simply your choice. But for this one, I want it just to be cut right around the actual image itself. And so PNGs have no background. I'll put both of these in here. And so it's nice in that you don't have to do any extra steps by finding a PNG that you like, if there's one available. And then you can see that the red line is where your Cameo sees to then cut, and you can see that it's going to cut right around the image themselves, and there's no square background around it that it would see instead to cut. But let's say I couldn't find this particular image in a PNG format, and I wanted to cut out just Deadpool, in this case, out of that square or rectangle, so that it would only cut around the Deadpool image itself. What you would do is go to your trace menu or trace panel, which looks kind of like a butterfly. Then go ahead and click select trace area, and then your cursor will turn from arrow to like a crosshair, and then you'll want to highlight the image that you want to try to capture and trace. So if I put a box around Deadpool, you'll see that it turns him yellow. And then what I like to do is I like to increase the threshold until the Deadpool, or in this case Deadpool, is fully colored into yellow. And what I'm going for is filling in some of these dots on the inside here. So I'm going to increase that till it looks fully solid, or as close to fully solid as possible. You notice that as I go up in threshold, it's also bringing in some other things on the outside, which may be fine. You can also try using some of the other functions like despeckling, which seems to make the dot sizes a bit smaller, from what I can tell. And then high pass I don't necessarily mess with, because you'll see what happens as soon as you turn it on. Anyway, so this looks like it's pretty much captured everything that I want. And so next step is you want to take Deadpool out of the white rectangular background. So in this case, what we'll do is trace and detach. Give your computer a second to calculate whatever it's doing, and it looks like nothing happened. So the square, the yellow, all disappeared. But you'll notice now if I click on Deadpool himself, I grab just Deadpool. If you notice, the square is gone. Where what happened is we detached him out of that square or rectangle, and you can see that's the background that we separated this actual image from. So I'm going to go ahead, now I can delete that background, and then you can look here and see I did bring in a little bit of the shadow and some of the white around it. If you're not okay with that, you could try tracing it again. All right, and then you can go ahead and adjust your threshold a little bit more again. And notice this time it's not grabbing quite as much as the shadow around down here, and it's trying to grab everything inside. And so you adjust that again a little bit more, and let's say that I'm happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and hit trace and detach again. Boom. And you can see it left some outer edges of Deadpool's image there, so you can select all those because there may be multiple items here now, and go ahead and delete that out. And now you have just Deadpool without having that square background. And so when we look at the cut function, when we go to send it for cutting, you can see now it's going to trace just the Deadpool image, not cut out or try to cut out a rectangle around Deadpool. Okay, and so what we'll want to do next is, once you have that ready to go, whatever image you're going to use, whether it's a PNG or if you have to trace and detach, what you'll want to do is set this up onto your, in this case, your A4 size print media, and we're going to set it up for printing. So I know that I want this Deadpool, I'm going to have him laying across the bottom of my PC glass. So I'm going to put him in here, and then I'm going to rotate my object by 90 degrees, and then I'm going to put him here, and then I'm going to resize him so that he's pretty big and mostly fills up this item. Now you'll have to double check the actual size that you can make your image to fit on whatever application you are putting it on. And so here, I can see that height wise, or in this case I think this is still the width, is right at 10 inches. So I'll just go ahead and do 10. 0.5, make it slightly bigger. And I notice that it's now hitting the cut border, so I don't want it quite that big. So let's just go back to an even 10 inches, and so I have a little bit of leeway that way and that way. All right, and so now what I'm going to do is this is ready to be printed. This one I'll do as a separate one later, but let's for the purposes of this project right now with this particular piece, let's just print one image of Deadpool for that. Okay, now that I have it in the printable media as I need it, what you'll want to do next is you're going to have to send this to your printer. The Cameo is not a printer. You actually have to have a printer. I'm using an inkjet printer, and so with this ready, I'm going to go to File, and then I'm going to go to Print. You can also just use Control P if you are on Windows. I'm not sure what Mac is. I think it's Command P. Okay, and so it'll bring you to this preview, and then if you hit Print, what I like to do then is, you notice mine will bring up these print menus. I like to go into this particular print menu, and then what I will do is then click Preferences, and it brings up a more detailed menu. And then so I will treat this like a photo. Actually, no, let's go back to standard. I'm going to go ahead and leave it as standard, or actually, and then for your media type, select a photo paper, and yours may show up slightly different. This is just based on my printer, which is a Canon Pixma Pro 100, and this is just the options that are built into it's whatever the printer tells the computer. And I'm just going to select regular glossy photo paper. I don't necessarily know what the difference is between glossy paper plus 2A and platinum N and all that. I just know that I'm going to use glossy photo paper because I've tried it before and it works just fine. If you want to know what those other ones are, go ahead and Google that. I just haven't bothered to do that. Under print quality, you want to ensure that you have high, so you get the best resolution possible and most detail. And then under printer paper size, remember we are using an A4, so be sure to select the appropriate printer paper size in this case for the printing media that you are doing. And then once that is done and ready, what you'll do is make sure that you have your paper source ready to go. As far as where it's going to take from your rear tray. I know some printers have multiple trays, so make sure that is set correctly, and then hit OK. And that brings you back to this. And then you'll want to apply. And that makes sure that those settings that you just did will apply to this particular project. And when you're ready to go, make sure your printer is on and has the printable media loaded in properly. So follow the directions on how you're supposed to have the printable media loaded into your printer, and then hit print when you're ready to go. And so my printer has finished printing out our image that we sent to it from Silhouette Studio, and as you can see here, it is printed nice and cleanly, just like on the virtual cutting mat. Again, I was using inkjet Waterslide decal on the white background, not the clear. It depends on your usage case, and in this case we're using the white one, so I have more solid. And these are the registration marks that your Cameo will then use for getting set up for cutting. The next step is to ensure that we coat our Waterslide decal. I'm using a clear acrylic spray, as you can see here, just something I picked up at probably Michael's or Hobby Lobby, something like that. Anyway, you want to add at least 2 or 3 coatings of it, and you can see what I like to do is I will do 2 coatings here in one direction, spraying first. Maybe tape down your paper so it doesn't move around like mine did there. And so you can see I'm putting in even coating, holding it about 12 inches away. Follow the directions on your particular spray can. And then once I have that coat done, I like to spray it in an opposite or perpendicular direction to ensure that I have good, clear, clean, even coating on the decal itself. Make sure you follow the directions. Do this process probably about 2 or 3 times, allowing proper drying time and ventilation when you're doing this process. Once you're done, this will be and dried, ready to go for cutting. And here it is dried off. I let it dry for about overnight, and you can see a nice shiny sheen on it. And so this provides a protective coating for the decal once it's put into the water. And so now let's go ahead and get this mounted onto our cutting mat. We're going to mount it the way we have it oriented on our virtual cutting mat, towards the top and on the top left as I'm pointing upward, aligning the top left corner where the square is on my registration mark square on the top left corner of my mat lines, and then the left side and the top side perpendicular or parallel to each of the sides there. I'm using a mat that's not quite as sticky so that it will peel off easier, and then we'll put it in our cutting machine. So I've hit start on my Cameo, and you can see what it's doing is it's going to register those points here. It's scanning. This part here has a red laser in a sense, and so it's scanning that area, and now the upper right area, so that it has a good registration of where it is relative to the graphic, so that it can then cut the graphic out. So after doing some calculations or whatever it's doing, it's going to go ahead and set the blade depth. Once the blade depth is set, it will go ahead and start cutting out the image. Again, it will cut out all the red lines that you saw on the Silhouette Studio page, and it will just go ahead and cut everything out to include in between those areas there. So now we'll just let the Cameo do its thing. Alright, so now that it has finished cutting, make sure that it goes all the way through, because it does pause occasionally in between, and it might mislead you into thinking that it's done. So wait till it's completely done and your carriage returns to the top left and sits there. It does say job complete, and then unload. Alright, with that said, go ahead and unload it. Alright, time to get this peeled off and weeded. Alright, and so now we're peeling this off of the cutting mat, and this is, you'll see why I like to use an older, not quite so sticky brand new cutting mat, is because when you, in my experience, when you peel off stickers like this or Waterslide decals, anything that's on a paper that you need to then kind of weed around or out to leave the actual image, brand new cutting mats are so sticky that it just tends to hold on to the paper so hard and so tight that it tends to rip and leave shreds of paper all over the mat. As you can actually kind of see little itty bitty bits of paper shreds still stuck to my mat there. Now, because this is a white background Waterslide decal, we do have some weeding to do. I just like to use a X-Acto knife, as you can see me doing. I'll poke into the paper and then kind of flick it up a little bit so that it takes that right out. I do the same technique when I'm doing weeding out vinyl, or even vinyl stickers that have been print and cut. If this was a clear Waterslide decal, you could just, you don't have to cut out around or in between all the letters. You could have just cut around the entire lettering and the graphic itself, and would hold everything together. You can see the L is a little bit loose there because it's just hanging on or connected by a little thread. Carefully, once you're done, because those letters are kind of loose, peel the remaining decal, or your actual decal now, off of the cutting mat, and this is ready to go essentially for putting it into water for water slide on whatever surface you're going to be putting on. In this case, I'll be putting on the glass siding of a PC case. Okay, so now that we have our Deadpool water slide decal cut out, now this L is just hanging on by a thread, but we can move this around in the water on the surface here, as you'll see in just a moment. I got a little container tray of water. It's lukewarm. I think warm water helps it separate from the paper a little faster. And then this is the glass panel, which is the side panel of a PC that I'm going to be applying it to. You can see the protective film, plastic film is still on it. So I'm going to go ahead and get this in the water now to get it started. And I know that it may curl up. I kind of just put this down so that it gets in and stays fully submerged in the water. Okay, hold that down just for a minute there. And probably after about like 30 odd seconds or so, it'll start to be able to separate. So you can see that I had this on a towel here just to help. Since this is glass, protect that. It is tempered glass, so it shouldn't shatter per se, but also to absorb some of the water, so it'll make quite a big mess. Now I'm going to go ahead and peel off this plastic protective sheet that came with the glass. I'm going to take some of this water here. I'm going to kind of put, I am going to put it on this area here that we're going to apply the decal to, and that will just help ensure that this can slide around and move around as we are trying to apply this decal. This one's going to be a little tricky because it is big. It has like loose floppy letters, and so I can see that the A is already starting to come off here. So I'm going to go and pick this up carefully. Okay, and then what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to put it where I had the water. I'm going to start to try to slide this carefully off of the paper onto the water. Add more water if you need to help keep it movable. You can see it's kind of wrinkling a little bit. Just be careful not to let things fold over on itself, otherwise you're going to have to unfold those. Like that's, I'm going to have to fix that a little bit later here. All right, so basically just carefully, as best as possible, try to get this off of the water slide. This is a difficult one to do just because of the type of decal. I should have just done a bigger one that's more solid, not with all these little shapes inside of it. But hey, who doesn't enjoy a challenge, I suppose. Okay, that's my L. It's separated, that's fine. And then, see, as long as you keep this wet and in water, you can maneuver this around. So I'm going to add some more water so I can allow it to go to different areas and give myself some space as I work to get this off. Here. Take your time so that you don't rip this. This is very thin as well. Totally messing up Deadpool's leg right here. All right, paper's off. What an ordeal. Let's get this out of the way. All right, so let's get him positioned to where I want. Straighten him out just a little bit here, flatten that out. So I kind of want, not kind of, I do want him lined up against this bottom line here. Now I have a couple folded areas there, so I'm going to need some sort of a tool to help me get to those. Keep that wet, keep that wet. I need to unfold this. I'm just using a vinyl wrap micro squeegee to help here. Unfold that. Hopefully that's enough. Okay, get that out. There we go. Now I gotta get this A unfolded as well. So let's try to get that off of itself here. Carefully, just take your time and be careful. Okay. All right, so I got that unfolded. Looks like I got a little bit of the D here folded over on itself. Again, this was a little more difficult because of the type of graphic it is. Lots of detail in it. Probably should have gone with something not quite so crazy. But hey, like I said, challenge. All right, so let's get this unfolded. Again, just be careful because this is thin material. I'm just trying to take my time and be careful here. Again, having the water keeps it movable and from sticking. It's unsuccessful in getting all of that out, so let's go like that. Almost. Try it from this angle here. There we go. I think that might be it. All right, so those letters are good. Let's go ahead and get it in place here. Dead poo. Okay. Let's get that there. Let's get this L where it should be. Right about there-ish. Okay, now I'm just going to make sure that this is lined up as best as I can against this bottom line here. All right, if you have paper towels, they're really good at sucking up water as well. All right. Let me turn this like this so I can get more of this towel onto it. Again, I'm just trying to get some of the excess water off. I do want a little bit left on there because I'm going to have to move this around still. So you can see doing that kind of made it all wrinkly. And that's fine for right now. Okay. So that's about where I want that. Now I'm going to take a squeegee. This is a regular vinyl wrap squeegee. This buffer is called a banana buffer. It's kind of a spongy, thick one. It's actually intended for PPF. I'm going to wet it just a little bit. I'm going to use this to help smooth some of this out. Like this. And I wet it just a little bit so that it will slide on this a little better. I'm trying to be careful, and I'm just trying to smooth everything out here. Adding just a hair of pressure. Okay, just a little bit, making sure all my letters are lined up the way I want. Make sure nothing's wrinkled. Everything's flat and smoothed out. Okay, put my L back where it needs to be, right about there. Alright, so that is essentially in place where I want it. I'm just going to adjust this a hair, like that. Okay, now because this is such a delicate graphic and design, and the more I mess with it, it's obvious that the more I can potentially mess it up. I've actually got it in a good place right now where it's pretty smooth. I'm just going to let it sit and dry here for a little bit. And here's the final product after it's been able to dry for a couple of days. Try not to put too much clay here. I'm just wearing these rubber gloves so I don't get fingerprints all over the glass, since I had to pull the plastic protective film off of it. So pretty cool. It does have the white back, but it's somewhat see-through, which is kind of what I wanted. It's a little bit easier to see when there's no light behind the actual image. And here's another one that I had done that I didn't show the process on because it's the same thing as the bigger Deadpool one. This one, anyway, so this is a different one that goes on the front panel glass of the PC. So I'll show you here what it looks like all put together. Alright guys, so this is the final product all put together now on the PC case. You can see I have the red lights on behind it. I do have lights on outside, but the red light kind of glows behind the actual decal itself. If you used, this is with the white background so that when there is no light behind it, it's more visible and easy to see. You could also use clear, and I think more light would shine through the decal, but when the computer is dark behind it without those lights from the fans inside of it, it won't be quite as visible with no lights on if your computer's off and just sitting there. Anyway, so this is just some fun with Waterslide to help theme a PC. If you like this video, you know the drill. Give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button and the bell notification button, guys. I always appreciate your support. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.